very grateful that we have two prominent lawyers, I think at least two, maybe more on this call, to figure out what sort of legally and ethically how we determine what that, how we determine that 50% quorum attendance rule, e.g. who can be remote and who can be in person every month. And so those were the three main items. So maybe with that in mind, we could just start. How do people feel about and Jay, do you have a question? Your hand's up. Go ahead.
Oh, you muted.
I did have a question. Max, you said something about the latitude that the boards have in determining, who can be excused and so forth. And I apologize. I had meant to. I saw the statute and I saw the commentary from the New York State Commission on Open Meetings Law. And my recollection, I just couldn't pin my finger on the text in time, but my recollection is that it's relatively specific that in order to be excused from attending in person, there had to be exceptional circumstances. That's the phrase, and I believe that the commission gave some examples, most of which were relatively, obvious, like sickness or family emergencies, things like that. But so my impression is that while there is some discretion involved, that and I think the commission actually has a statement in their analysis that said that once the law goes into effect, they expect city agencies to resume the process that existed pre-pandemic, and that the circumstances for being excused were relatively narrow, and so with respect, I'm not sure your rainstorm analogy would fly in the face of that. So I just wanted to make the point that I think we need to assume that basically we're going back to in-person meetings, that we have to have a location where there's a quorum and that's accessible to the public, and that it is, as I'll repeat, only in exceptional circumstances that a member will be excused from attending. That's my brief summary of the gist of the statute and the guide, if you will, by the state commission.
Well, to put that together with what Max said, does that turn out in Max's view or Jay's view or both that the rainstorm won't do it? And if more than 50%, or if I don't end up 50% in person because it's a rainstorm, we don't have a meeting? We can't have a meeting? We don't have a quorum?
Well,
I think that's correct.
If something like that had happened previously, we couldn't proceed without a quorum.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that result if that's the result. Jay, that I've been with you on show up in person or don't, or go do something else with your life, but we're faced with the hybrid.
I mean, I will say that from what our borough president and our state senator, who I believe proposed this in Albany, 2 months ago, have both said is actually different from that, Jay. And so I don't know what actually came down at the end. So Max, I hate to put you on the spot, but you're probably closer to this than we are. But my understanding was the whole reason they wanted the hybrid model was actually, and I'm not saying I agree with it because, but it was to give people more than just like a health, absolutely can't be there reason for being at a meeting, to make it more accessible to people who have children, to people who have work commitments, to people who have other things. And I think my understanding was that was the spirit for why this hybrid model was created coming out of COVID. Yeah.
No,
I
and
mean,
that,
That's true.
That-
I think the
meeting-
caveat is they can't vote from home, and or count towards quorum. And so obviously, if you're really engaged and really want to cast a vote on a specific issue, you're going to have to show up here to do it. But it does in some instances like that. Going back to what Jay said, though, I agree. The language, you were fully correct. It was something to the effect of exceptional circumstance, but then they sort of were vague. I mean, it was clear to them that if you're immunocompromised and you're undergoing some sort of treatments, that counts for them. If you're zooming in from your home in southern Vermont, that's a little different. But where exactly is the line being drawn for someone, I think in Elizabeth's example, that has some like childcare duties? And I think that's maybe where we have some ability to decide.
I think also
I don't disagree that there's, there has to be an element of discretion, but I think, Elizabeth, that, if somebody gets appointed to the board who has a couple of little kids, they won't be able to accept that appointment on the theory that they don't have to come to meetings, that this is a regular thing. I think, I can only go by what I saw, the statutory language and the commentary. And I know Mark Levine said last night that they're going to be looking at it, and I suspect they will come down with their guidelines for community boards, some document like that, obviously, that we'll have to look at. But the statute, while it allows for some discretion, I thought was pretty clear. And as I said, the commission said they expect city agencies, including community boards, to go back to a normal a way of doing business with the possibility of exceptions when the circumstances warrant it. But, I think
I want to call on Shelly and Ken, and then I think I have a road ahead for us if there are no other questions. So,
do you want us to
Shelley?
raise hands to talk, Elizabeth? We can do that.
If possible. I just think a lot of people have things to say, and we only have 45 more minutes. So yeah, Bob after that. So Shelly, Ken, and then Bob, and then Klari. Shelly, you're muted.
Shelly or me?
There you go.
The question I have question about is, granted that certain people will possibly not be able to come for whatever reason, we'll determine what those acceptable reasons are. Does that, and I know that those people who are home can't vote, but do they count for a quorum?
No.
No.
If you're
not,
home, not a quorum.
so if not, they're just participating in the meeting.
Yeah.
They don't make the quorum and they can't vote.
So
Are
the
they
issue is we
count-
need to have 26 people at every full board meeting.
Right. Are they counted for their attendance?
I
think so.
We know that.
Oh, I was gonna say I don't think so, but I guess the point is it was not covered when I was being
Okay.
debriefed by the borough president's
But I
office.
think that's an important issue because people's attendance is important. And
Right.
if they should have some acceptable reason repeatedly, possibly, for not being present, therefore not being able to vote or in a quorum, will their attendance at the meeting mean anything if it's by remote?
Or why would they want to attend at all if their vote isn't going to
Okay.
count?
Well,
And-
hopefully they
don't
care and they
count
want
for
to
a quorum.
contribute, but.
Right. But I think just to go back to, I've talked to a number of board members who I know everyone on this Zoom, and I wish we had a couple newer members. Maybe we can recruit one of the new members to join this task force. But I do think there's a marked difference between sort of people who have been to a lot of our meetings and who understand how things get done and how you learn from people who are sitting next to you or talking to people, and then people who have they've only been doing Zoom meetings for the last 2 years, who may have joined 2 years ago. So they don't have any frame of reference. And I think they feel like, well, wait, this is pretty good right now. Like, this should be the default. Why can't You know, why can't I be at work while I'm Zooming into our board meeting? And I'm saying that not because I have an opinion on it. I'm saying it just because there are people who I think feel that, you know, they haven't seen sort of how the board has worked in person before. So Ken, over to you. And then I think Klari, you were next, and then Bob Espier. Oh no, Bob next, and then Klari.
Okay, well, maybe we should, you know, not be speculating as to what's in the law, but, you know, we should actually look at the law. I have a summary. I think I'm looking at a summary that Mark Diller did, but I haven't looked through it. And sorry, I should have read it before the meeting. But my recollection is the whole point of having the hybrid meetings is to allow people who are have exceptional circumstances, and that would include COVID, or, you know, being immunocompromised or living with somebody who's immunocompromised, to fully to participate and vote and count towards quorum. That's my understanding.
Okay, and I think what Max is saying is that that's not what the legislation has said, or what.
I respectfully disagree, but maybe I'm wrong. That was my understanding. Otherwise, why have hybrid meetings? So, you know,
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
What's the number of the bill?
Yeah, let's see. Well, it's the changes to the open meetings law, public officers law, sections 101 et sec, adopted A9006-C.
Okay.
So
I
Jay
will
can
add
be
this.
our legistar person to look that up while we hear from other folks. And again, look, this is changing all the time. I've been out of town for work. As many of you know, I travel once a year for 3 weeks out of the country. So a lot of these changes and the legislation was passing right before the budget deadlines in late May or mid-May. And so, you know, I appreciate everyone who's on the task force. It's why we're a task force, looking up this stuff, and you know, we'll work on this together. So I guess Bob, you are next.
Yeah, I think that I think it was Max who mentioned childcare, and that I think is a perfect example with respect to the law suggesting that we have more latitude than we even think. So, for example, you have a young mother at home with early childhood needs,
Or father
or father with early childhood needs, and who cannot afford childcare services, babysitters, and all of that. So you wind up, if that person doesn't count or cannot, or should not even apply for the board, that's disenfranchisement, and essentially you're disenfranchising an entire class. But I think the answer is where someone else, may have been Jay, is suggesting that the law gives you latitude. And I think that we have to pick up those options. We have to identify them, which I think we're doing, but pick them up and take charge, take the bull by the horn sort of thing and say, well, this is what we're going to do on 7. And the law does not say we cannot do it. Because if you're looking at our district, not only is our numbers of my likes, seniors increasing in great numbers, young families are moving in. And they have to participate, and a lot of them are engaged in civic activities and so on. And all of a sudden, they're not able to participate in the community board because we're not seeing that we have a right to permit them to. That's my comment.
Got it. Thank you. Klari, and then I think we'll just I'll go back to Jay and Ken if their hands are still up.
Okay, so I think I come out somewhat differently from what I understood Robert to just have said, and I would say that I'm probably one of the least helpful people on this somewhat changing composition of this task force, because first of all, I have zero competence, or less than anybody else, and no more than anybody, in all of the Zoom and all the technical stuff. And second, because I do have a strong view that if you're not willing to be a full member of Community Board 7 and to commit enough time, find enough time and commit it, then don't be on the board. I do not have a tremendous amount of sympathy for the idea that you should never have to come to a meeting because you have 2 kids. But I know other people may differ on that. So I come strongly from that point of view. But what I wanted to say is I think we have to look at the question we're talking about now, not only from what the new law says, and I can contribute nothing on that to what Jay and Max and Ken have variously said, but also against the very, very generous absence policy that we adopted last night. I voted no on the bylaws, but they were adopted. So for the first time in recent memory, the bylaws not only give you 3 times, I think it's 3 out of 12, but it's really out of 10 because we don't have July and August, to not show up for any reason. That's the unexcused absences, but they also provide a ton of different, like 7 or 8 versions of excused absences. And I think if you've got COVID, that's an excused absence, and there are all sorts of other illness, there are all sorts of excused absences. So already on the face of it in our bylaws, you've got many, many bases to not show up at all. So when I look at what should be the role of somebody who can't come to or chooses for whatever reason not to come in person, I think people have already so much leeway not to come at all and not have it count against them, that I'm not at all troubled by the idea that if you're not there in person, you're not part of a quorum and you can't vote, if that is in case what the law says. And I guess on top of what we already have in the bylaws, I would look to fairly narrowly define what are the reasons that you may cite for not attending in person. But then that yet again gets us back to what somebody said a little while ago. Why would you do it anyway? If you're, what is the value of having this hybrid form as applicable to board members as opposed to members of the public, where it has a great value? If you can't vote, you don't make part of a quorum, and you would just plain not show up, and it would not really hurt your record anyway. So I sort of can't put all that together.
Got it. I see Madge's hand is raised, so I want to go to her since she hasn't spoken yet, and then Jay and Ken.
This is a little off topic, but I said to Elizabeth, I forwarded something to her. Tomorrow there's a program on hybrid Zoom that Zoom is offering tomorrow. I forget, in the middle of the day.
Yes.
So if Elizabeth, if you would forward it to everybody else. Maybe.
I sent it to Max and he's going to share it with the task force. I don't know if you want to put it in the chat now, but also maybe email the task force with those details. I think that was going to be the final point I was going to make in this conversation, but I'm glad you raised it. Really just sort of like how to do meetings over Zoom. I mean, the reality is that as much as we're talking today about the nuts and bolts of how we're going to do these meetings, there is going to be a Zoom option for every single meeting that we do at Community Board 7 starting effectively July 1st. So, even if we're not meeting in July or in August, by the time we come back in September, we're going to have that. And I think it looks like a useful workshop or sort of webinar. So if any of you are available tomorrow, I would encourage you to do that. I don't know. How do you guys feel about whether it should go to the full board versus just the task force? I didn't want to spam everyone after the busy meeting last night, but it might be something that some of our board members would be interested in.
I would recommend sharing it.
Okay. So Max, would you be able to do that?
Unfortunately, I'm going to be working at that time, but if they record it, it would be great to also share whatever link to the recording might be there, because it is the middle of the day and like.
Yes, exactly. Excellent. Okay.
Could I also put in my 2 cents?
Of course.
I think we should come to meetings. I think the idea of if it's raining, not coming just doesn't do it. You're going to participate. And having had children I was bringing up during this, there are ways to manage it. You trade off with your friends and neighbors. It's not that you have to be able to afford babysitters. You just trade with people or someone in your family, and you get someone to cover you.
Right. I mean, the main issues that were raised throughout this process over the past few months have been, I think it was either Ken who mentioned, we want to make sure we're being as inclusive as possible to the entire community to make sure that they are able to access our meetings and be board members and vote. My understanding, again, from the elected officials who proposed this was, again, the spirit was not just because of COVID. I think COVID opened up the doors, but I think they also felt as though there should be other more broader reasons that people could still participate remotely that did not include health-related issues. And
Okay,
I don't think
I don't want
that,
to make you repeat everything again.
I'm sorry?
I don't want to make you repeat all this.
No, but Madge, I think what you're saying is very valid. And I think there is an element, I think we all agree, everyone on this call agrees that there is a level of commitment that is involved in being on a community board that involves actually showing up and not just showing up like we're doing right now, like showing up in person to the extent that we can. So point well taken. I'm going to Mark since he hasn't, Mark, Erana, and then Jay and Ken.
Thanks. So you probably, I apologize for being late, but I was in a meeting, so I got here as soon as I could. If I understand the question correctly, it's effectively what would qualify as good reason to participate, and by participate I mean counting toward a quorum and counting toward a vote. The statutory language is a little unhelpful in that regard because they talk about extraordinary circumstances, I believe are the words that they use, and then they go on to talk about things that are like chronic, like childcare. As a recidivist PTA president, I'll tell you that if you wanted people to come to a meeting and you didn't have childcare and you didn't have pizza, you weren't really serious about engaging parents. So there's a bit of a dichotomy there. That said, we're never going to be a place that has childcare and pizza. So, I think we go back to a model of unusual or extraordinary circumstances. So I'm going to pick on poor Erana, who was under the weather last night, and I hope is feeling better today. But if Erana on one given meeting was not up to travel because of an illness, I think that is perfectly valid for her to participate remotely. But I don't think that it should be, I would be a little bit concerned about it being things like I'm tied up at work or things like that.
Mark, do you, not to put Erana on the spot here, but it's a good example.
Oh, let's.
Like, so, and Erana, feel free to respond and weigh in on this. Do you feel that it's one thing for Erana to be able to dial into the meeting when she's not feeling well? Do you think that that if somebody is ill, they should have the right to vote, or per some other people who have spoken, given the new bylaws, because there is incredible latitude on excused absences, that whether a person who is ill and not physically present should have the opportunity to count for quorum and vote?
So I think that by virtue of the legislature giving us this pass that didn't exist before, I think it's a good thing. And so I think that there ought to be some gatekeeper or mechanism to qualify, and that could take two forms. One, there could be a check-ins, a self-authenticating checklist that I decide that I'm too sick to come to a meeting because I don't want to get everybody else sick with whatever I've got, whether it's COVID or just the flu or a cold. That I need to check in with Max or whoever the right person designated is, and to make sure that I'm not screwing up a quorum by doing so, although not being there either way is probably screwing up the quorum. And with a list of things like cold and flu, bleeding profusely, whatever it might be, but not I'm stuck at work. I have chronic childcare problems. It's one thing if the babysitter calls in with COVID that afternoon. It's another if you just don't have a babysitter and you got to scramble. So, and then the other would be some sort of mechanism for a one-off where it might fit into the categories that don't make the automatic list. And then you need somebody to give you a nod to say yes, and I'm open to who that might be.
Great.
Does that help?
Erana, I'm going to turn it over to you because we've used you as an example already, and I know you have things to say. But
thank you for letting me be the star of that last.
You're the star of the meeting today, Erana.
So I'm actually, I'll be very transparent. I contracted COVID. I was one of these people that did everything you could possibly do to avoid it. I'm at the end of it, thank goodness, and my symptoms were cold-like symptoms. But I will tell you this, that my first symptom, I did not expect that I had COVID. And so I think this hybrid model is particularly important because some people are asymptomatic with COVID. In my case, I had a sore throat, but it was mild. But I was smart enough to go and get tested nonetheless, and boom. And so I was actually pleased that I reached out to Mark yesterday. I told him I was not well. And I was pleased that I had the ability to be able to dial in on Zoom. And I told him I wouldn't be on the screen, and he was fine with that. Because there are some meetings where you're not even allowed to be off camera. And so my point is that I do think that, I think it was Mark that was talking about coming up with criteria. It's just really important for folks to be able, if they're not well, for their vote to be counted. This is what concerns me, is that I think if you meet the criteria, that you should be able to stay home, join the meeting by Zoom, and still participate and vote. And this is particularly important for committees, because while we have a better chance of reaching quorum at a full board meeting, we often have issues at the committee level where you can't reach quorum, right? Because because of the numbers, if quite a few people are out. But the other side of this is that there are people in our community that don't have access to Zoom or to a computer after a library closes.
Yep.
And they may want to participate in board meetings, and even though they show up, what is it like for a community person to make an effort to come, and then they have more than half the room is empty because board members are at home and not there present. So I agree with Madge. Like I feel that when you apply for the board, there's an expectation that you will come to meetings, committee meetings, full board meetings, meet the public, engage with your fellow members. I'll be honest, the meetings that I haven't come to in-person meetings because I get the sense no one's there. And maybe I shouldn't presume that, but I have. And so I do think we should slowly make our way back. Last thing I'll say is, I think the timing of this is of concern, because if July and August were out, we're coming back in the fall when typically people go back indoors, and historically people have gotten reinfected or infected for the first time in the fall and winter. And so what I wish is that they give us a bit more, I don't know, maybe it's better this way. Maybe we should see what happens when when it's cold and when it's the fall and people have gotten boosted again or whatever medical treatments precautions they're gonna take to get through the fall and winter. Maybe this is a good litmus test for us to see if we can do this and keep people safe and well. Thank you.
Thanks, Erana. Those are all really, really great points. And I do think, we have this window of time as a task force, especially since we voted last night that I think apparently we will not be having July meetings of any sort, right? Or August meetings of any sort. It doesn't mean that we can't continue to communicate as a task force over the course of the summer to propose some recommendations and make even perhaps maybe meet. But I think those are really, really important points that for us to move forward into September. I do think that almost everyone on this call shares the feeling that we really need to be together at some level. And, there's always, again, I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but we either need to make some recommendations that plan for the fact that every September, every winter, there's going to be outbreaks and we need to change our plans accordingly for those outbreaks for COVID related issues. Or we need to say, hey, this is something that's going to be with us for a long time and we have to deal with it. And we've put a very generous, absence policy in place in our bylaws so that people who do get sick don't have to come, they don't have it counted against them, and we move forward that way.
Let me just say that we've been making provisions for cold and flu seasons for as long as I can remember.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to go to Doug next because he hasn't spoken, and then maybe to Max because he probably has something he wants to, unless Max, there's something that you.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm certainly willing to wait because I saw other people's hands up way before me and I'm not on the task force. So please feel free to go to someone else and I'll come in later.
We're all friends here. This is not, last night with 500 people on the call. So
right. No, I just wanted to say that in full disclosure, I also am getting over COVID and I'm much better now, but I had to attend a business conference and I was extremely cautious, and me and 12 or 11 other people from my company contracted COVID. Thank God everybody is recovering. So I think one of the things I just want to say is that Mark just mentioned it. Not only do we want to make sure that the participant is excused if they are sick, they should absolutely not come anywhere near any of us or members of the public. So it's doubly important to disincentivize. We want to tell anyone, in fact, in my office now, and it's been for a while, like, you have a sniffle, you stay home. We want you to stay home. But I know this is a problem nationwide. These office buildings are, not coming back. I know that I'm in my office very seldom now, but more and more as we go through. So I just wanted to just emphasize that it's, we really do want to protect each other and the public. And the only other thing I was going to say is that we did actually just decide, I think somewhat officially, that we are going to have a BCI meeting in July. So I need to figure out, I guess, by the time we have that BCI meeting, we will be, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll have to do a hybrid at this point.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's correct.
All right, so we're going to have to pay attention to exactly how we do that.
Thankfully, though, I'll just jump in on that end. We'll be ready for that. It's not like, no offense, BCI is a great committee, but it's not going to have the attendance that our full board did last night. Yeah. So we'll be set and we'll be ready for you just on a note on that end. Yeah.
If I could jump in on that real quick and make sure that preservation the same, because we lose. Because LPC doesn't wait for us is the short answer. So if we don't meet for 2 months, then there's going to be a bevy of applications that we never see that probably we would want to. God forbid West Park would have been one of them, right? If it,
Or it'd be a really fun September meeting.
Or
I guess everything would be done by then, so it wouldn't matter. But No, those are great points, guys. I do think the July meeting, one of the things I really wanted to do as an outcome of this meeting was to sort of divide up a few things we could task as a task force, a few people, if not everyone, with a few things that we could think about when we come back, and hopefully, if it's okay with everyone, figure out a time in July where we could have a Zoom like this. Again, I don't know if we have to, I guess we'll have to do half in person. We'll have to, I don't know if it applies to task forces as well as committees. But regardless, I think it would be important to have a July conversation at some point, even if it's informal. So, okay, so I see in terms of hands raised, Jay, Ken, and Madge. So I'm going to go in that order.
Yeah, a couple.
And Klari. And Max,
couple-
did you answer, just before we go there, Max, did you have another thing you wanted to add? Because
I was going to share an anecdote, but maybe I won't actually. Perhaps not.
Well, anecdotes are last on the agenda. First of all, I want to correct my friend Robert, who said something about what I said about discretion. I think I prefaced it by saying very limited discretion. So I just want to clear the record. I just have a couple of points. First of all, without repeating it, most everything that Klari said, I agree with. And I come from that starting point on in-person meetings. A couple of points. Number one, if pre-pandemic and pre-Zoom, if you were sick and you couldn't come to a meeting, you didn't count towards the quorum and you couldn't vote. We've never had a provision for people who can't make a meeting to vote. We've always had a prohibition against proxy voting. So there was no way around it. So even under the new law and the new rules, if you're too sick to go to a meeting, it's the same as it's always been if you don't count to a quorum and you don't get to vote. And I just wanted to emphasize again, based on what Mark was saying, that no matter what the law says, I believe the law, the phrase is exceptional circumstances. And Ken's shaking his head. That's what it says, Ken. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have the law in front.
It's extraordinary, as Mark said.
Is that what it says?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think they're synonymous, but
I mean, look, I think the default needs to, I think we can all be in agreement that the default for any meeting we do at Community Board 7 needs to start with, you need to be there in person. If you have an extraordinary situation, that's when we start thinking, the board chair, the borough president starts thinking about what those conditions are that meet an extraordinary situation.
And that's kind of my point too, is it's important to keep that in mind, that it's extraordinary, that if someone joins the board, as I said, with a couple of little kids, they can't, at least in my opinion, they can't join it with the expectation that that's a circumstance that's extraordinary, that would give them license to never come to a committee meeting or to a board meeting in person. Now, conceitedly, not every single possible situation. It's certainly not covered in the statute, and I expect every single possible situation will not be covered in guidelines put forward by the State Commission on Open Meetings. So in some sense, we do have to wait, see what the guidelines are, see how the borough president, who is kind of our overseer on most matters, interprets it, and then make our decisions as to what our discretion, if any, is, and what we do with it.
I mean, I think
the ultimate goal is some sort of resolution or statement And
Yeah.
my last thing, Elizabeth, is
Yep.
there's nothing that prevents you, and I don't want anybody to yell at me for this, from calling a meeting in July or August. If you,
Right.
it will be productive.
No, I'd very much like to do that. And
Yeah, because just saying we can keep discussing it, you know, if
no, I'm all about, I'm conscious of the people who spend their summers traveling and doing other things. But again, this is an important topic. And I think we've moved beyond the point. Now we know what loosely this new legislation is, right? We know that starting in July, we have to do this new model. And I actually believe, because I've talked to Brad and, who proposed this, and I've not talked to the borough president's office other than Tricia Shimamura a couple of times. I do not think they have a policy. I do not think they know how to proceed. And I think there's an opportunity for us over the course of the next month or two to, just as we did for the original ideas, and I know elected officials listened to these Zoom calls that we were doing, and I know Brad joined one of them. I think he listened as we were noodling over these ideas. Now I think we have an opportunity to really set the course to help guide them. And with a little bit of work in July and August, or even in July, we could hopefully give them some data, give them some background, give them some recommendations, at least from the CB7 vantage point, that I think could really be helpful to the borough president's office, which is just getting, its sea legs and getting out there on its feet. So that to me would be like the best outcome of this task force, is to have that being done. So I just want to go back to, I think,
Max, if he knows, he'd probably be the best person. What if anything, other community boards, or particularly Manhattan community boards, are doing? Do they have a similar process? Or are they?
Sure. So everyone, to hear the district managers that I talked to say it, they're all scrambling to figure it out. As I said, the community boards that have like 1 or 2 meetings afterwards, but before their time off in July and August, they're just going to operate out of compliance, and then take the summer to figure it out. There was some boilerplate language sent to us by the borough president's office, but it was very clear that it was a works in progress, just hey, this is just, we're working on something like this, expect to follow up soon. And they're kind of in touch with us every week to try to, they're going to have firmer, stronger, better guidance soon-ish, hopefully.
but I think, again, I do think they will rely on board members' input. And what I would like to do from this task force is really to collect that input and send it to the borough president's office, so they know that we've been thinking about this for a long time, and that we can sort of, other than, they can see, Max is recording all of our Zoom calls, so they can go back and listen to the discussions. But I think even more important would be for us to leave this meeting today with, over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks before we meet again, have, a couple people, 3 or 4 people think through tasks, for instance, somebody thinking through, what are the technology needs of a full board meeting? What are the, I appreciate that Kay is offering, his space for full board meetings, but that's, we've never just used one location for full board meetings. And if we are going to go back in person, I do think the locations we use ultimately needs to reflect the diversity of the district and be in all sorts of locations. 2 is how we really think about, the issue of like what constitutes an excused absence, and is that excused absence part of the virtual 50% rule, or is it part of what's in the bylaws now about your generous excused absence policy and how and when you can vote? I think those are things that I would love, especially people who have sounder legal minds and analytic minds than I do, to think through that, about how we really think about like a just and fair way to do this. We have about 10 to 12 minutes left, so I want to make sure we handle remaining questions. I think I saw Klari and then Ken and then Mark.
Okay, so I'm sort of, well, losing patience is the wrong thing to say. I never lose patience with CB7, but we're just going around in circles. If we don't know for sure that the law that governs us does not allow somebody who is not at a meeting in person to vote or to be part of the quorum, unless we know that for sure, we're just going around in circles making things up. So we need to know that. Assuming it is true, and I hope that it is true, then to turn around what I said earlier and some other people said, there are now so many excuses in our new bylaws to not attend a meeting in person or not attend it at all, that somebody who doesn't want to take advantage of one of those or doesn't want to rely exclusively on one of those can come to the meeting anyway remotely. So all of the things in our bylaws don't say you can't come if you've got one of those many excuses or one of your many unexcused absences. That just says if you want to take advantage of it, you can. So I just don't get, at this point, without knowing what the rules are that govern us, I don't get what this is about, and I don't think we can accomplish anything more than we have. Sorry to sound dyspeptic, guys.
Thanks, Klari.
I can
Mark, do you
clarify
have a
that you're not
response to
going to
that?
be able
Or-
to vote from home.
Sorry, Max, repeat that.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying I can definitely clarify you're not going to be able to vote from home, and your vote will not be counted from home.
In which case, again, I don't understand what this is all about, because you got so many excuses, but if you want to come remotely, come remotely. If you don't, use
Mark,
one of
is
your.
that true?
That wasn't my understanding, but Max has been talking to a lot of smart people and has been paying attention to this. So I am loath to contradict. I was just looking for the text of the bill as it was passed, and it was not my understanding that that was the case. In fact, as Klari just said, there would be no reason in the world to have, excused absences or not, and that's a whole nother quagmire. There would be no purpose in having authorization for a hybrid meeting among members of the board without the ability to count toward quorum and vote. Because you can live stream a meeting right now, and our bylaw, to Jay's point, our bylaws never permitted this, but then again, neither did the open meetings law. Now it does. So it's an open question, whereas before it was not. I continue to believe that the legislature struck the right bargain, which is to require at least a quorum to be physically present in the same room. But I can't believe that. Well, let me put it this way: that wouldn't make sense. Whether something makes sense or not, and whether it gets passed by the legislature, if it doesn't make sense, yeah.
Well, look, the legislator is out of session. Klari, to your point, and not to make this meeting a complete waste of your time for the past hour,
No,
which we don't want to do.
Always a pleasure, Elizabeth.
And your input is always very valuable. I mean, I do think this is an opportunity for CB7 and the people who are on this Zoom. I actually, forgive me if I don't want to speak ill of our elected officials and our staff people, but I think they're just, and it's not, I don't think they know what to do. I think they need our input, and I think anything we can do to provide that, however much time we have, is going to be, I think, could help guide them on this. So I actually would argue that the work that we potentially could do over the next month could be quite important and valuable. So I see Bob and Shelly, sorry, Ken, Bob, Shelly, and then we have another few minutes, and I know Max we have another meeting for CB7 at 6:15, so.
Okay, just getting back to the question of, I agree with Klari and Jay that, everybody should show up in person, but the legislature the world has changed a little bit, and they are giving us other options, and there are reasons, I think we have to assume beyond COVID, that they're giving us other options. And one of those reasons could be, and Mark often brings this up, about somebody who has a disability that doesn't allow them to join a board like ours. And all of a sudden now they can join a board like ours. Or, our board tends to skew towards the older, and I'm a culprit of that. And and that's because there are a lot of people who have childcare responsibilities, and that preclude them from going to 3 meetings a month or more. And this would help them join a board like ours and participate fully. So it seems to me that we're talking about 2 things. We're talking about sort of, how did I put it? We're talking about unexpected excuses. Extraordinary, but unexpected extraordinary.
Yeah.
And we're talking about chronic extraordinary. And we might want to think about sort of issuing a waiver. That's the only word I can think of right now, where CV7 sort of gives a board member sort of a semi-permanent waiver from, if they have a chronic extraordinary circumstance and they can demonstrate it. It might be renewable every year or something. And so that they can be a board member and fully participate, and otherwise they couldn't, such as the person with the disability. So yeah, I would just throw that out, that we might want to consider doing that. And also, I think my understanding is that by participating remotely, you don't count towards quorum, because you have to have a quorum physically present, but you can vote. But we need to verify that.
Okay, thanks.
But I think that I don't think it's a question that the legislators don't know what to do. They certainly know what to do. They wrote the law, but they wrote the law in a certain way that allows us to pick up a little authority. And I think what they're waiting for is for us to be a little less coy in how we're handling this whole thing, and to take ownership. We're not taking ownership, and we're not stating what it is that we want to do. They want us, and then if there's a prime example of a board that could do this, it is 7. Okay, because we're vocal and we know how to talk and write and all that kind of stuff. So that I think our position should list the things, whether childcare, whether disability. Don't forget that we should be the first ones to defend every opportunity under ADA for people to participate. We've had big meetings, people representing ADA and local advocacy groups, people with disabilities, and all of a sudden, there might be a situation where, they might not be able to participate. And I said earlier, with respect to the childcare thing, and I respect the responses, that there's an insidious discriminatory feature to all of this disengagement from Zoom and being required to participate. But I think I want to see a little more ownership. And we're just coy. And we're too grown up for that. We're too sharp.
That's why we have a task force, Bob. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're doing this task force, to present to them. And it was no disrespect to our elected officials from what I said, but I do think they are operating in it just like we're all operating in a new era. So are they. The borough president has just started with a team that is very experienced and very good. And I think they really are looking to us. So I agree with what you've said, Shelly. And then I think if hands are still raised, Mark, Jay, and Klari, and then we've got to wrap up because I know Max has to get ready for his next meeting.
I began by asking a question, and if my answer that I got was correct, then if you don't attend the meeting in person and you're not a part of the quorum, you don't vote. Okay, so you're just sitting there and maybe you can participate. Okay, if that's what the law says and that's what's going to be, so be it. But I think we shouldn't accept it. We should challenge it. I think we should be for maximum inclusion, and inclusion means, okay, except for frivolous things, for extraordinary situations that people have, whether it be a disability that might be functional many over many meetings, or things that are more immediate. That number one, every member of the board can be counted for a quorum, can vote, okay, if they meet that criteria. And are considered in attendance. And that's simple, and that's inclusive. The other way is not inclusive. It's almost a yes or no. It's a binary choice as far as I'm concerned. And I think we should advocate for the maximum inclusion.
So it sounds like what you're saying is, I think as a task force, one of the concrete things we can do is come up with what those items are that would constitute being able to vote remotely, in person, and they can all attend remotely, but like to actually be able to count for a quorum and vote in person.
Exactly, and I'd be willing to be on a subcommittee if
Okay,
there was such a
Shelly,
thing.
I'm gonna, anyone who wants to join me and Shelly to think through those things will, okay, Mark, Mark, you're gonna, I think, have the last word. Jay, maybe for a quick second after, but. Oh, you're muted. I knew you would have this. This is why
Good.
we
Okay.
have a
So if you look-
parliamentarian and a bunch of lawyers on this call who know.
Righty. So
who
if
know
you look
government.
here in 2, a public body may in its discretion use video conferencing to conduct its meetings pursuant to the blah, 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 okay? So conducting a meeting means convening a quorum and taking votes. So in my view, that language means that we can, if otherwise permitted by whatever resolution we come up with, and consistent with the rule that you have to have a quorum in person, that the people who are not in person can participate and vote. So I believe that to be the case. I think one of the things that we should be doing is not just coming up with a list, and I'm happy to work on a list. I think I've already actually started it and shared it with a few people, but didn't get a lot of response. But I'll renew that, of what should be and what should not be the kinds of extraordinary circumstances that would give someone the opportunity to participate. There still needs to be some gatekeeper. And I think there also needs to be some kind of a statement of priority. It shouldn't be first come, first serve, so that a person with a disability gets edged out because it's inconvenient for me. And I think that is, so some sort of fairness, especially in the self-authenticating or self-effectuating designation. I'd be happy to work on that or continue to work on that with Shelly and anybody else who wants in, if that's what you're asking for.
Yeah, I think that's what we are thinking about. And again, I just want to remind everyone that I do believe that the new legislation has said that the one thing that has democratized the community boards has been that for the general public, not for our boards, there is a Zoom option. So people who have had mobility issues, people who are afraid of their safety, people who don't want to come in person to a meeting now have that option in perpetuity to be able to do that. So this is really about our 50 board members and how they get excused or included in these meetings. And also how we, quite frankly, I think, Shelly, to your point, how we make sure we have a couple new board members, how we make sure that like our policy is one that does seem as inclusive as possible, but also is something that reiterates the point that for the 50 board members, there is a higher standard than just showing up on a Zoom call 3 times a month. And I think we can all be in agreement that that's not a productive way for the board to manage its business. And we don't want that to be the default. We want people to be participatory among the 50 members, and we want them to be attending in person when they can, but also recognizing that there are extraordinary circumstances, largely health related, but could be other extraordinary circumstances as well. And we'll work on what those sort of things are. And when we come back again in July, we can maybe present those and talk about them and share with them. Hopefully, Shelly, Mark is the next step. Anyone else who wants to, we can work on that, present it to the team on this call over email, and then come back in July, hopefully with some concrete guidelines. I think that's going to be it for tonight, Jay, unless you have a final thing you wanted to.
Just a quick comment. I'm happy to work with Mark and Klari as a legal.
Great.
Because we do. Klari's
you.
right. We need to at least clarify what we think the absolute requirements and prohibitions are in the law, because ultimately that will govern. But I also wanted to say that, hearkening back to a seismic agreement between me and Ken on a resolution referencing the Hoylman bill. I just want to point out the section that Mark just pointed out about teleconferencing is not new law. That's old law.
Right.
Agencies, that law existed forever, that agencies could in fact hold meetings by teleconference with certain, bells and whistles, recording, access to the public. But that was always in the law. This is really a whole new aspect of that law, but that part of it actually always existed. That's it. I'm done.
Excellent. Okay, look, thanks everyone for your time. I'm going to let everyone go. I think as a next step, we will circulate some takeaways from this meeting over email in the next day or two. We will plan to convene anyone who wants to think through what these extraordinary circumstances are for our meetings. We will do a deeper dive, thanks to some of our legal and government affairs minds who are on this call, about what the legislation actually stands for. And we will hopefully have something when we meet up. I'll also circulate a proposal from all of you guys, probably a doodle or something about a poll just about what date would work best for July for everyone to try to meet. And the good news is we don't have to worry about, a ton of meetings in July, although that sounds like a couple are meeting, and really appreciate everyone's time this evening. And it's beautiful out, so I hope everyone enjoys the nice evening, and we will see you soon. I hope, Erana, you're feeling better, and Doug, you're feeling better, and everyone stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.